Thank you, Derek. Thank you, and good morning to you all. It's great to be here. I'm putting my cheaters on, turning 50 this year, so without that, I would not be able to read my notes, but I'm so grateful to be here. It's truly energizing to be able to share this day together. I'm grateful and humbled to be part of this journey. The pursuit and understanding of God's way. What a great topic that we have to explore. And while I'm up here to get us started, it's truly a start with great messages from Bob and Scott on right and just to follow, and then Derek taking us home after the breakout sessions later, all focused on God's way. I believe you will find a common theme amongst the talks, and hope there are insightful topics for discussion later, as well as continued pursuit of these ideas as we move forward after today. It doesn't end after today. This is a continuous process. I don't believe there's a better jumping off point to dive into our pursuit of God's way than the opportunity to explore God's love in his way through Christ. It's just amazing. I'm not sure there's a more foundational aspect of the Christian message than God's love. Amazing beauty in the simplicity of that message, creating the ultimate bridge from our inherent flaws as sinners to the gates of heaven. I'm up here not only share and explore with you, I'm also up here talking to myself. These are always reminders for me. So just as I'm up here speaking, these are reminders to myself as I mature in my growth around the importance and impact of his way. So I'm excited to lean into this with you all. I was on my way here today and I typed into my little chat GPT how many references of love or loved in the Bible, and somewhere between 600 and 800 in the Bible, depending on the version. So I'm not going to hit all 600, 800 today. I'm going to focus on three themes of love in God's way built into the world. God's love for us, God's desire for us to love ourselves, and God's way for us to love one another. So those three themes I want to explore with you all today. So let's jump into it. God's love for us. It's abundantly clear throughout the course of the Bible that God's way is for us to understand his love for us. Let's look at some of these clear messages. Psalm 144:2. He is my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield in whom I take refuge, who subdues people under me. Psalm 118:1-2. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let Israel say, his love endures forever. Psalm 103:8. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. It's all laid out here. His love is steadfast, it's forever, it endures, it's faithful, it provides refuge. It is a fortress, a rock that cannot be broken. He calls us to be in relationship with him. That is so we can know his love. We don't need to feel lesser. I know sometimes I do, like we're not worthy of his love, right? We're falling behind. Nor do we need to curry favor for his love. It's there. And if we're unsure of his love, is there a better example of God's love for us than sending his own to sacrifice himself for us? That is the closing loop of God's way in showing love for us. It is complete through Jesus. Laid out in the Bible, perhaps one of the most well-known quoted verses, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. But we may still wonder and question. We need to have trust, as the worship band mentioned. Some days I don't feel, honestly, God's love so much, right? I'm tired, I'm stressed, I feel lost. Perhaps there are struggles that individuals have with addiction or relationship issues or death or disease of a loved one. We're all dealing with stuff, and stuff that may call into question how and where God is loving us right now. I've felt lost. I have been angry. Why is this happening to me? Common questions you may all have as well. And you question, but then God's way shows itself. And then inherently know. His steadfast love is there, and our trials are his trials, and he is there with us along those trials. So it's in those times when you feel hopeless or lost, that's when he opens our hearts, and that out-of-body feeling of knowing God is there. I have these moments like, all right, God is there with me, despite these feelings, despite these questions, perhaps despite the anger. So again, we see comfort in the word that reflects all of God's loving ways. Psalm 25:10. All the ways of the Lord are loving and faithful toward those who keep the demands of his covenant. All the ways are loving if we seek him and are faithful in our ways toward God. And I think this word toward is so critical. I think it has double meaning here. There's a connotation that our relationship with God can be seen as moving and progressing, not something to solve or to be complete. We're loved, and that is incredibly powerful because inherent in his covenant, these words ring profoundly true. All the ways of the Lord are loving and faithful, as it relates to his desire that since we are of him, that we are not only to be understanding of his love, but also accepting of his love, and therefore be loving to ourselves. Despite all our faults and flaws, we are loved, and therefore we are to love ourselves. So that leads to the second point of God's loving way. He is calling us to love ourselves. I came across this verse that really resonated on this topic. Lamentations 3:22 through 23. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. This is the part of the talk where I'm equally talking to myself as I'm talking to you all, because the challenges we all face every day are tough. The demands are real. The self-imposed expectations seem ever more unattainable. But God tells us here, be not consumed. Love yourself. You are worthy. We live in an epidemic today. We are, as men, as a society, as lonely as ever. There's stats around this. Depression, anxiety, really running rampant. I believe a key foundation to this is that we do not love ourselves as God intended, and not in an egotistical way to love oneself, but in a self-compassion, grace-infused way that God desires for us, because God is love and we are loved. Who could be harder on themselves than those around them? Anyone? I know I do. I don't know about you, but many days I feel like I'm operating at a C- grade level at all the various aspects pulling out my life, family, friends, all the other responsibilities that come across my desk each day. And I'm here to remind myself that all of that is just noise. That little voice in our heads talking to us all day, telling us how we are falling behind or failing at X, Y, and Z. Perhaps go onto social media or hearing from others, and we may get trapped into what we don't have or what we are or what we aren't doing. It's an easy trap that can spiral downward quickly. And again, I'm here to tell myself, and hopefully a small part that will resonate with you all, that none of that matters, because you need to do nothing to know God's love, and therefore be completely at peace with loving yourself. And that leads to our third topic of God's way of clearly loving one another. And this is a bit of a flywheel effect, in my view, in the sense that if we can love ourselves, if we can know God's love, that we can go freely to love one another. So let's explore that, where God speaks to us about loving one another. It is truly his way, and he sent his only son, to show it to us. John 13:34. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. You must love one another. 1 John 4:7, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. I've personally gone through a very hard situation over the last year, deep sadness. There are days where I've just wanted to bury myself into a hole, dig myself deep, and just wait for the storm to pass by. Despite the sadness, despite moments of wanting to just disappear, the demands and expectations are still there, and I don't necessarily feel like myself all the time. Maybe you all have had similar experiences or feelings during difficult situations. But this is not what God wants here, in a sense, to eliminate from others, to remove ourselves from others. He wants us to be there for one another. Love one another isn't simply about doing the right thing or being nice or kind. That's certainly important. It's about the truly powerful effect of being in relationship with God and one another, where you can know and understand what others are going through. Because you just don't know. And burying myself in a hole is not going to allow me to love one another or for others to love me. So we're called into this great fellowship with Christ because of this message that we need to love one another to the best of our abilities. We may fall short, and it's not about being perfect, certainly, with one another, because that is not possible. It's knowing the grace of God's way to open your heart to others, to acknowledge where we may not want to love on others, to recognize that. We may not want to forgive. We may want to avoid it all and bury ourselves in that hole. It's where God calls us here to dig deeper, to remember his message. Back to my flywheel effect analogy of knowing God's love for us, loving ourselves, and loving one another, and how that is all intertwined and related. The golden rule, perhaps, as well quoted as any. Luke 6:31, do to others as you would have them do to you. There's a presumption in this message, isn't there? And that presumption is that you will treat others well because you treat yourself well. You will treat others kindly because you're kind to yourself. If we're kind to others, loving others, and not to ourselves, we're not living out the true meaning of this message. It's a living contradiction. More likely, in many cases for myself, at least, speaking of circumstances, when I'm hard on myself, not kind to myself, I may, be more likely to be harder on others. Maybe less compassionate, less patient, less understanding, less loving. In a word, grumpy. I think I have many of those days. And so loving one another, critical message of the Bible, starts with understanding God's love for us and his desire that for us to love ourselves as his creation. As I was finalizing this talk, I was provided with an additional verse to consider, which really resonated and captures all of these aspects. 1 John 4:10 through 11. This is love. Not that we love God, but he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God loved us, we also ought to love one another. Loving ways throughout the Bible. The message to myself and my call for you is that we are all here for one another. Hey, we're here on a Saturday together in relationship because we are, in our own ways, being called to these special relationships with each other and with God. And we also ought to love one another. God's loving ways are steadfast. Seek comfort in knowing this. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to be up here this morning. I'm excited to explore this journey, both in the breakout sessions and going forward. I look forward to meeting all of you later today. Thank you.